The following is going to be a tutorial on how to build a lockdown card and a lockdown release card for the velocity access control system. In order to build a lockdown, one of the first things you're going to need to do is go into the properties of the panel that you want to lock down. Once you've navigated there, you're going to go to your Control Zones tab, Edit Control Zones. In the standard control zones, you're going to select a control zone, name it as the appropriate name. You're going to give it a time zone of always, and you will select what doors you physically want to lock down by putting an X in the associated door relay. While you're in the standard control zone screen, you can also write your lockdown release standard control zone. The next thing you'll have to do once you've built a standard control zone is you will need to build master control zones that are related to the lockdown standard control zone and a master control zone related to the standard control zone lockdown release. This can be done through the master control zone tab in the controller properties. From the master control zone number, there's a drop-down list of availables. In this instance, my suggestion is that you always use master control zone 192 for your lockdown and master control zone 193 for your lockdown release. Regardless of where you are, what panel you're working on, always use that, even at different campuses, even if they're not all linking through. This is just a standard, making a standard. So of course, giving the master control zone a name that includes lockdown, giving a description that it's a lockdown and what it's locking down is important. As you can see, I've entered. You're going to want to put a time zone in there. Typically, using always is perfectly fine. You always want this to be able to be done. the next item that you have to address in your master control zone, whether it's for your lockdown or your lockdown release, is set threat level 2. By default, it comes up as a NC, or not used. In this instance, this needs to work in conjunction with you need to consider the threat levels that you have assigned to individual card holders. Are we wanting to use 3 or 5 for our lockdown? I think we're using 5 before at a...
I set her as a 5, so 4.
So 4? Okay. So what needs to happen is you need to consider what lockdown level you are giving to different card holders. Anybody, so whatever value you select, in this case we are selecting a 4. Oh, no. We're going to select a 6 because we've given our administrator a lockdown level, or I'm sorry, a threat level of 5. This means that her threat level is lesser numerically in value than the threat level that we're putting the panel into. This means her card will override the system. Her staff that are level 10 threat levels, their cards will not let them into the building during a lockdown. The next item that we have to address is a map to global ID. We keep things simple. The values are 0 through whatever. In this instance, we're going to use the value of 1 for our map to global ID. We then need to select and put a check mark in the broadcast globally box. The next thing that we need to do is, as we go down through the action menu and we scroll down, we will find lockdown. It's going to ask us what control zone are we going to use. When we click here where it says no control, we will get the drop down menu, and we are going to select lockdown because that's what the name of this one is, lockdown. It automatically populates what we already put into the standard control zone. Once we've done that, we've finished. Now you can go on to build your lockdown release master control zone, which will be identical, but instead of an action of lockdown, it will be lockdown release. Okay, so that completes what we need to do in the controller properties as far as building standard control zones for lockdown and lockdown release, and linking those standard control zones to master control zones for lockdown release, lockdown and lockdown release. One more thing that we need to do while we're still in the properties is, if we go to the General tab, is we need to ensure that the Setup tab in the controller properties, we need to ensure that we select a check mark in the Enable Global Master Control Zones, as you can see here. This is going to tell this controller to communicate its master control zones in a lockdown situation to the other controllers within its RS-45 network if you have more than one panel on a site, more than one access controller on a site. Okay, so the next step is we get to go to the next controller in the same RS-45 network underneath the same port, multiple controllers under one port, and we're going to do essentially the same thing so that it knows to lock its doors down during a lockdown and to release them during a lockdown release. Once again, each panel that you have on a site that is under the same port, the same network drop controls multiple panels. We need to do this in each panel. We're going to go into properties on the next and last panel on this site, and I'll walk you through this. Everything I'll be doing right now will be familiar to what we just did previously on the last panel. Second panel at Marie Hughes, elevators are on 6 and 7. Do we lock down elevators since they're interiors?
Yes.
You do not want the elevators to work during the lockdown.
Yes.
Okay. It's also important to understand and to know what your doors are and what doors you want to lock down before you build these. I happen to know what our door list is. If you're building one of these for the first time and you're not certain of your door list, you can simply get a list of your doors. Make sure you understand what you want to lock down. If you have an interior door and you're not concerned about locking an interior door, then you simply would not put the X to select that particular door relay. If a door uses more than one relay, just the assigned door number 1 relay that's on the motherboard, and it utilizes other auxiliary relays, it will be important to understand what those are and to select those as well. In this instance, we don't have to worry about this. You'll notice as I build the master control zone for lockdown on the second panel at Marie Hughes Elementary School, on the first panel I had checked the broadcast globally box in the master control zone for lockdown and lockdown release. That is because we need, when the lockdown happens on the first panel, we need it to broadcast back to the panel here at the second panel. They can read that card, the lockdown card, at any card reader on that second panel, and it would lock down the system. If we don't broadcast globally, it will only lock down the doors on that panel. So lockdown globally is important. In this instance, we are going to select lockdown globally again under the unlikely event that it's necessary to lock down from the second panel. If they read a lockdown card on any card reader on the second panel, it will broadcast globally back to the first panel and still lock down the whole school. You'll notice that my map to global ID for the lockdown release master control zone on the second panel, the map to global ID number 2 is the exact identical number that I selected for the lockdown release map to global ID on the first panel. This is necessary so that when you are broadcasting globally, that you're telling it knows what it's trying to do on the other side. So these global IDs need to match. The lockdown global ID on each panel needs to match at each panel so that it knows what it's doing there. And of course, we don't need the explanation, but the help button is helpful. And I'm going to look at something real quick and not talk to you about what I'm doing. That's right. Once you've built these again, you can say OK to your standard and master control zones. Oops. If you try to make a mistake, it will tell you. The reason why we're getting the rename to a unique is because I named it the same as the other side. And just like before, even though you've completed the editing of your control zones, you will want to stop at the controller properties setup page or tab and ensure that you once again check mark the enable global master control zones. Without doing this, none of this will work. Now we've completed the actual programming of the physical panels, the hardware side of it. It's now necessary to build cards. This will be done through the enrollment manager. Building a lockdown release card will be the same as building a person. You'll want to select whatever templates you've used for that particular group or of people or facility. You'll want to set that into its particular group. In this case, we're dealing with 365 Marie Hughes. And then, of course, you're going to want to give this a name that you're going to be able to find in the future. It goes, so with that being said, now the argument may come up that I gave the first name of Lockdown and the last name of 365 Marie Hughes. But as this is displayed in the enrollment manager list, it's nice that you can go back, and if we put the last name as Lockdown, then we can go to Lockdown and we can catch everything alphabetically by lockdown and lockdown release, and then the first name is going to say where it actually works. Building the credential, you can add the new credential from a template, the 2 card or whatever you're using for that facility. You'll select your card, read it, just like always. Now the magic happens here. Function tab, add. This is where adding a lockdown and lockdown release card are different. The function category will change. You are going to call it instead of access, you're going to call it a relay, and you're going to tell it to, I believe it's trigger. And you're going to tell it to trigger your master control zone. Oops, let's find it. Uh-oh. Sorry, you also have to select the correct panel. My mistake. Pardon. Now we will go to our master control zone. For lockdown. Add it. Now what we can do is say OK. We'll say OK to that overall. Excellent. Now what we can do is we can add a card for the lockdown release, which is the exact same procedure. Just you'll be requesting that you trigger the lockdown release master control zone. Once again, once you've selected function category relay and function trigger, you need to select the appropriate panel. Again, in this instance, Emery Hughes panel. And lockdown. Oops, sorry. We need to do the master control zone lockdown release. Simply say OK. Oops. Boom, boom, boom. Lockdown release. Good. And then, of course, you want to test this by going out to a card reader and presenting the lockdown. Make sure that the facility does lock down. Make sure that people that don't have an access level that allows them through cannot get through, and make sure that the administrator can. Once that's done, you can simply read the lockdown release card, and any door that had been in a time zone door unlock time should go back to being unlocked. And that concludes how to build a lockdown and lockdown release card in the Velocity software.